please. And I'm here today with Harm. I'm a nutritional therapist and health coach, and I'm going to share my story with you. So Harm is kindly here to interview me and ask any questions that he needs for his university research. And that's a good way for me to share my story. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks. My name is Harm. I'm a second-year master student at Tallinn University of Technology and the Estonian Arts Academy. I'm studying the program Design and Technology Futures. And at the moment, I'm working on my thesis research, where I am researching the world of food intolerances and looking for a problem that can be solved through design, which could be a service, an app, a product, so something in that direction. And as part of my research, I am interviewing different people that deal with food intolerances, like experts, people that have experience with it. So I'm very happy that you agreed to do this interview with me.
Mm-hmm. Very glad. So let's dive straight in. You can start with your questions, and I'm happy to share my last 4 or 5 years, what happened to me in my life, what diagnosis I have, how does it change my food choices, and how I can survive in this world.
That's perfect, because it's actually exactly where I wanted to start. So yeah, if you could share just your personal story and start with, I know you have some experience with food intolerances, so if you could tell me a little bit about how you found out about that, how you diagnosed it, or what kind of tests that you did, and then how you ended up actually being a nutritional therapist, because I think it's a super interesting story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so of course I went to study for my own experience. So back in early 2017, I was very, very sick, to be honest, and nobody really knew what was going on with me. So it took me about 4 or 5 months to get rid of. It was practically just like a regular cold and flu, which just lasted like a long time, didn't want to go away. And that's when my diagnosis started to come in. So the first one I got back in January 2017 was lactose intolerance and irritable bowel syndrome. So irritable bowel syndrome is IBS. But what I've learned so far is that if you have IBS diagnosis, that means that the medical system doesn't really know what to do with you. They're kind of like stuck or in a dead end. But the good news is that for the people who do have IBS, there's a diet called Fodmap Diet, which is supposed to help. So the statistics is about 50 to 70% of people will get help from this special diet. I tried it. It didn't help me. So I had to go and dig deeper in my research. And I was very tired. I was pretty much like on my sofa for like 4 or 5 months. I just didn't have the energy. Also, my iron and B12 levels were very, very low. And it took me actually another 7 months before I got my celiac diagnosis. And I had to go and ask from the doctors it myself, because the medical system wasn't really guiding me properly. And it was actually a bit of a story with that, because the first marker they test, which they did also in my case back in January 2017, was a blood marker. It's called transglutaminase antibodies. And those in my case were negative, which means I was perfectly healthy, right, for the celiac disease. So my story didn't end right there. I found a really good gastroenterologist who decided to do a biopsy on me. And by swallowing a tube, gastroscopy it's called medically, they found out that my intestinal villi were damaged. So that was the reason why my nutrients were not absorbing. So that's the reason why my iron and B12 were low. And then after that, I got the diagnosis of celiac disease. Of course, I had to go to a follow-up procedure, which was roughly 4 or 5 months later. And that showed that when gluten was completely out from my diet, my intestinal villi had started healing. I wasn't anymore iron deficient, I wasn't anymore B12 deficient, and my body finally started to heal. So I was really happy that I got this. But even though I was already studying nutrition back then, it took me another 2 or 3 years until I started taking my diagnosis seriously. Because what happened is that if you are celiac, you just don't avoid gluten. You also have to avoid cross-contamination. So for example, if I went to a friend's place and they offered me something which was gluten-free, a nice, baked muffin or anything, which was with buckwheat flour or rice flour, Sure, I tried it, and I didn't know sometimes why I was still having pains in the middle of the night until I started taking the cross-contamination seriously, which means that as a celiac disease person, you only are allowed to consume grains which have the gluten-free certification on the package. So for example, even like here in Estonia where I live, you can get many like products like buckwheat and rice and porridges and flours, which are not certified. That means that they use the same production lines for also other gluten-containing cereals, and that's the problem. Because if you're a celiac disease patient, you really have to avoid every single molecule.
Yeah,
It's kind
and
of
I can
like
actually,
diet.
yeah, and I can actually give the contrast to that because I have non-celiac gluten intolerance, which means for me that if I eat a full plate of something that has gluten, so if it's like pasta or I eat a pizza, then 1 or 2 days after, all my joints will lock up and I will be very, very tired. So yeah, that really messes me up, but it's completely dependent on how much I actually get in. So if I eat a little bit, I don't really notice it. If it's maybe just a muffin or just something to test, to taste, it's all right. But at the same time, if I eat a lot, if I go overboard, then I can completely knock myself out for a couple of days.
That is so true because the food intolerances, they can appear up to 72 hours later, which is 3 days. And that's exactly
Yeah.
how you feel on the second day and third day.
Yeah, for me, it's
What's still
definitely always second day.
But may I ask how you got this diagnosis? Because it's not really that common actually in Estonia especially to get this diagnosis. So how did your journey lead to that, this non-celiac gluten sensitivity?
Well, I have a similar start as your story, where for about 2 years I was just tired all the time. All my neck would hurt, my back would hurt, and I just felt really weak, tired, messed up. Some days were worse than others, but I never knew why. And I assumed it had to do something with my spine because at the same time I was seeing a physiotherapist to correct my spine posture because I'm very tall, so I was a bit like hunched over and so I just thought, okay, it's time that I get my spine treated again. That's why I'm feeling bad. And then it would be a bit better sometimes. Sometimes it would be worse. But overall, I just felt really bad. And at the same time, my mom had a couple of different food-related symptoms that she couldn't really place. And then she started seeing a therapist that does the sorry, what did you call it again?
Bioresonance?
Yes, I keep blanking on the word, the bioresonance testing, like we discussed before the interview. Through the bioresonance testing, she found out about a couple of different food intolerances. And then as I was moving to Estonia in a couple of months, my mom told me like, okay, I don't care if you believe in this or not. I don't care if you're skeptical, because I was very skeptical about the idea of bioresonance. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But my mom was like, okay, you're leaving the country. I don't care if you believe it or not. You're coming with me to see her, and then she's going to give her diagnosis. You don't have to believe her, but at least I want to get you tested. And I went there really, really skeptical, really ready to just not accept anything she would say. And we started testing. And I told her, okay, you can test me, but don't tell me what you're testing for, and let's just see if the machine says anything. And at some point she's testing, and then as you know, the dial just goes up a little bit or not, and then she tested one thing, and the dial goes like full score, full sensitive, and she's like, that's wheat and rye and spelt and all that stuff, all the gluten. I'm like, but I don't think I have a gluten intolerance or any grain related intolerance, or what does it do? She's like, well, it can be diarrhea, it can be bloating, it can be stomach problems. It can also make you very tired and make your muscles really cramped up. And then I was like, ah,
Makes sense, yeah.
that makes total sense. And I never in my life considered that it could be related to food, and definitely not wheat. I didn't even know that a wheat or gluten intolerance was a thing. So then for the next couple of months, I started taking everything out of my diet. I stopped eating bread. I started using gluten-free pasta or pasta made from lentils or peas or all the alternative foods. And then I felt so much better. It was ridiculous. I already felt like I had accepted that, okay, I'm just going to be tired for the rest of my life. Like something is messed up. This is just how it is. I don't know what to do. And it completely changed everything.
That's so true, actually, even in my case, because the moment I stopped eating gluten, I had to sleep like 3 hours less every night. I could just sleep
Yeah,
like hours and hours and never be enough with the sleep.
I
And now
would have
it's,
the exact same.
now
Yeah.
it's like 8, 9 hours and I just can't sleep more. I just wake up.
Yeah, for me it was this, and especially what was really bad, I couldn't wake up. That was the worst. It's
Mm.
not even, uh, I mean, being tired is one thing, but I would have to drag myself out of bed into the shower, and then during the day at maybe 11, 12, I would feel awake, but still I had to be at work at 8, so I would just drag myself through the morning to even make it. So,
Yeah. But did you read about the non-celiac gluten sensitivity yourself, or did you actually go to a practitioner in addition to the bioresonance?
no, so after the bioresonance, I haven't done any other tests or worked with any other
Mm.
professionals, mostly because, so I'm calling it non-celiac gluten sensitivity, but it's not properly diagnosed as that name.
Okay.
But I know that I react to wheat, spelt,
Barley?
uh,
Oats,
barley as well.
right?
Yeah. Oats, also, I thought I was actually fine with oats, but I noticed they give me maybe a little bit less effect, but also an effect. So yeah, it's something that I could get checked out with another professional or do some other tests, but at the same time, for me, avoiding these foods, it seems to work.
All right. I just want to highlight that, medically, once you do decide to go and test for gluten, you actually do need to consume gluten for 6 weeks.
For six
So
weeks.
6 weeks, yeah, at least two slices of bread. So I know that would mess up, you
Yeah,
probably if you feel it. And actually, one
yeah,
of my clients is going through that right now. So I just really do feel sorry for those people. That's why it's really good to have actually the test done before going completely gluten free, because after that it could be different,
yeah,
difficult to diagnose or just to be able to eat so much gluten.
yeah.
Hmm. All right. That was my story. So thank you very much for sharing yours. And you do have some other questions for your university project. We will stop the recording here and continue with that. But I want to thank everyone for listening and hope this helps in your journey.